So as I mentioned, the first company that I'm going to discuss today is Orbital Insight. We're going to dive right into the usual structure of talking about the team, sources of funding, kind of talk a little bit more about the industry to familiarize you guys with kind of what the geospatial intelligence landscape looks like, talk a little bit about the product and end users, and get into competitive analysis and those key metrics. So let's get into it. So as I mentioned, Orbital Insight is a geospatial analytics company, and they provide this as a kind of SaaS model, offering their platform on a recurring revenue basis. The company provides geospatial data as well as AI-driven analytics to provide insights to clients. And as I mentioned, those use cases are really kind of on the supply chain side, geopolitics and different socio and economic trends that are taking place. The company's raised over $120 million, so it's kind of in that growth stage right now. Still has not published a valuation indicating that it's reached unicorn status. So on the earlier stage of what we tend to present, but obviously that leaves a lot of room for valuation expansion. And the company was founded in 2013 and is based out of Palo Alto. So the kind of key players here are the founder of the company, James Crawford, who runs the technology side. Previously, Dr. Crawford was an engineering director at Google, did research at Bell Labs and NASA, and decided to start kind of a different kind of business service company, utilizing a lot of the satellite imagery that was starting to take place in kind of the late 21st century. And recently, Dr. Crawford stepped down as the CEO of the company, promoting Kevin O'Brien to CEO. Previously, Kevin O'Brien was the COO and worked at a startup which was later acquired by FactSet. So Kevin O'Brien brings a lot of experience in terms of operationally working with smaller companies and then working in much larger companies. He's somebody who understands the organization and is definitely well positioned to take over in the CEO role. Around this team, you have kind of a really interesting group of highly educated and highly qualified individuals. Christian Clanton has a PhD in astrology, is currently the director of data science at the company, did his postdoc at NASA. Jim Cook comes over as a prior founder and is now the CFO of the company. So was recently installed in that role, which suggests that the company is filling out that executive team. Expect them to hire a COO in the near future. As I mentioned, the company's raised about $120 million to date. The most recent funding round came in November of 2019. So given kind of the current cycles we're seeing in terms of venture funding, it would not be a surprise if Orbital Insight raised in the next year or so. So if you're interested in a company that's likely about to experience kind of a valuation step up, this might be a really good time to invest. Sequoia and Lux Capital are really kind of the key players here in terms of the VCs involved. Sequoia we've talked about a lot, but obviously the company has a really impressive track record, bringing a number of different companies from seed stage to kind of a public debut. And Lux Capital has a tendency to focus on the satellites and aerospace industry. So I would say that it's pretty significant that a sector-specific investor like Lux has kind of viewed the field in geospatial intelligence and decided to place their bets on Orbital Insight. Additionally, Google Ventures is another key investor, having led the Series B round. And you see organizations like Goldman Sachs and Bloomberg Data, which is the venture capital arm of Bloomberg, taking positions in this company as well. So the geospatial data intelligence industry kind of falls under this wide range of discretionary business spending, and also has one foot in the kind of government's contracts space as well. So when we think about the company having both feet in public and private sector work, that really gives it a nice TAM in terms of both providing services to the private sector that are useful kind of long term, and also having the nice stability of public sector contracts that I can rely on consistently. So the private sector clients typically exist in the financial, energy, real estate, or industrial sector, whereas government clients have included U.S. agencies like the NGA, the NRO, and kind of the analogous agencies that exist in the other Five Eyes countries. In terms of market size, kind of the typical quoted statistic comes from Allied Research. In 2020, geospatial analytics was valued at about $61 billion in kind of annual revenue. And the expectation is that by 2030, this is going to be a $210 billion industry, growing pretty significantly at 13%. So definitely outpacing the wider economy. Expectation is that geospatial analytics will probably be one of the largest components of government contracts, or in terms of growth of government contracts going forward. So when we look at some of the key factors that have been catalysts in this market, demand for AI-based GIS solutions, and kind of the increase in smart cities development and urban planning to monitor, different developments on the ground, as well as the spread of COVID-19, the global supply chain bottleneck, and geopolitical tensions. All of these factors contribute to the need to kind of be able to see what different geographies look like using satellite imagery, and kind of analyzing that imagery against prior versions. So, for example, buildups of Russian troops on the Ukrainian borders right now is kind of a hot button issue in terms of geopolitics. And I would say that, being able to compare images of the Russian-Ukrainian border now compared to maybe 2 months ago or a year ago to see exactly what the density of Russian troops looks like is, kind of the obvious example of how geopolitical tensions might lead to, a greater demand for this service, or at least what one use case might be. So in terms of industry trends, I mentioned that, the growth in GIS analytics contracts over kind of the next 10 years is expected to significantly outpace other areas of military spending. And just kind of rewinding for the past year and a half, massive government contracts have been given out kind of on a monthly or quarterly basis. So in April of 2020, Orbital Insight was awarded a phase 2 contract with the Air Force Strategic Finance arm. And basically, Orbital Insight is now helping the Air Force detect anomalies around the world with analytics powered by artificial intelligence and satellite imagery and IoT devices. The U.S. Special Ops Command awarded CACI a contract worth up to $375 million for geospatial expertise on May 25th of that year. On September 6th of this year, Jacobs was selected to modernize the NGA's geospatial data services under a 7-year contract. And at the end of September of this year, Hawkeye 360 received a $10 million contract from the NGA. So these are pretty significant developments that really illustrate the government's continued interest in the geospatial analytics industry. And, kind of going forward, we expect that across Five Eyes countries that spend significantly less on their military, that these contracts of kind of an analogous size will be kind of piloted in those countries. The US is typically, at least in the military side, on kind of the cutting edge of the technological tools available. Getting into the product here, the company launched their own kind of platform service in May of 2019, and that is available to American, European, and Asian consumers. Basically, the platform gives users the ability to either pre-select certain geographies that are kind of built into the platform's library, or create custom geographies to visualize densities over time, any sort of anomalies that have existed. The company gives kind of very cookie cutter examples, like how dense shopping malls are, how busy the back to school season might be, new home construction in a certain geography. But all of these kind of tools or these use cases, I would say, provide very specific examples of how this kind of tool can be extremely powerful in creating ground truth for organizations that base significant economic decisions on the information that is available. So, getting kind of the best version of that information possible is really significant in determining how to plan forward or kind of, strategic decisions about investments. So this easy to use tool is kind of very powerful and very useful and user friendly in terms of providing that ground truth for end users. The company has a significant partnership with Airbus, which I think is a really interesting example of a kind of a large public organization that's basing a lot of its clientele's spending and kind of credibility with its clientele on the type of analytics provided by Orbital Insight. So Airbus's defense clients basically have access to the company's platforms, Pleiades and Spot, as well as their One Atlas platform. And the One Atlas platform is now completely integrated with Orbital Insight's technology. So, using certain kind of density functions and those AI analytics and algorithms that the company has developed in-house, all of that information is now completely integrated into Airbus's One Atlas platform. The end users here, we've discussed kind of vaguely what sectors they fall into, but I think it's really significant to kind of understand the scale of the companies that are being advertised here. So, large oil majors like BP, financial institutions like Sumitomo, RBC Capital Markets, and Deutsche Bank, Standard & Poor's, and kind of large consumer goods companies like Unilever that have complex international supply chains, all utilize this platform, as well as the US Air Force. So, the kind of reviews from end users could not be more glowing. The CEO of a real estate kind of finance company has basically said that the 2008 financial crisis would have been predicted if there was kind of this level of information and tooling around. At FCP, Orbital Insight has provided the team with more precise research and analysis. And in terms of, kind of glowing reports that are, pronounced among really kind of a very large international audience, Unilever shouted out Orbital Insight in their 2020 annual report, saying, they use Orbital Insight to get data around the first mile in supply chains. And they refine this data with the level of kind of imagery and detail that Orbital Insight is able to provide. So, really kind of glowing reviews across the board from the end users here. And in terms of competitors, I find that there are kind of very specific competitors on kind of an industry basis. A lot of the companies that do similar things to Orbital Insight focus their offerings towards very specific industries. So, for example, Descartes Labs, uses geospatial intelligence for specifically end users in the procurement and commodity procurement spaces. Specifically consumer packaged goods, agriculture, mining. So those kinds of use cases are really built into that platform. Hawkeye 360 is a company that's using radio frequency signals to create kind of visual mapping tools. So their satellite constellation is less focused on, specifically visual, or should I say, photographic evidence, whereas they're now using kind of more radio frequency signals to create heat maps. And Germany is kind of specifically geared towards real estate analytics. So again, what really distinguishes Orbital Insight in this instance is that the firm's clientele is across kind of a wider range of industry verticals, and that their tools are really not as, I would say they're generalized for greater use cases. And in terms of these key metrics, the company kind of boasts that they've identified over 8 billion objects in kind of their imagery with over 99.9% reliability. So obviously kind of being that source of ground truth is really significant, with 6 main industries covered. The total addressable market here of over $200 billion by 2030 is really significant. And the company is kind of funded by some of the top players in this space. So if you were going to make a bet on this space, I would probably bet on the same horse that Sequoia did. With the US government's intelligence budget at $85 billion plus as of next year, government contracts continue to be a really significant source of income in this industry. And the company was ranked the #1 top geospatial analytics company by industry sources, received Amazon Web Services Mission-Based Company Award in the space category, and was the fourth most innovative company in the entire space vertical, according to Fast Company. So a really interesting opportunity to bet on a company that is leveraging technology that is of the kind of next generation, with kind of that nice recurring revenue model on the kind of SaaS platform,